What's going on, guys? Welcome back to yet another episode of What's the Difference. Had another awesome episode this week. Had Karl Morris on. So Karl is the one of the leading performance coaches, if not the leading performance coach in Europe. He has worked with Lee Westwood, Louis Oosthuizen, and I believe Darren Clark. The list goes on and on. Laurie Cantor. Man, he was just such a knowledge source and really had a different and interesting take on what's the difference, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I really did. He is someone who I have looked up to for so long and is one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to every year. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I thought it was awesome. So thanks. Guys, welcome back to another episode of AJ Porter Golf. This week we have a great mind in the world of golf on. We have Karl Morris. Karl, good to see you. How are you?
AJ, thanks for asking me on the show. I always enjoy these conversations and look forward to seeing where this one goes.
Yeah, no, I'm really honored to have you on. You've been certainly a big influence in my life, even if you don't realize it. But so ultimately, this is the eighth video in a set of videos where our goal is to establish a question, that I've been asking for years, which is ultimately how to break through, right? Or what's the difference in being able to break through? For me, it's playing high-level amateur golf into hopefully professional. But it can be for anybody, right? It can be for a 15 handicap that wants to break down to five or whatever else. You've worked with many of the top players in the world, Louis Oosthuizen, Lee Westwood. So I thought you'd be a great person to bring on for this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great subject to explore, and I think for me, AJ, the simpler you can keep things with this, and then be able to take direct action, the better. With at the moment we're kind of drowning in information, but thirsting for knowledge. As a mentor of mine, Chuck Hogan, said maybe 40 years ago, and I think it's more so than ever now. It's great that there's stuff that you can look at on the internet and YouTube and things like that. But I think if you're going to improve as a player, it really is about being disciplined to take all that information and bring it down to some key concepts that then you can take action on, the things that you can actually do on a daily basis. And for me, the more I've looked at it, it sort of maybe it's because I'm getting older, it's got simpler and simpler in a way that I now see it, whatever level you are at golf, if you want to explore becoming a better version of you as a golfer, if you want to get to whatever the next level is, it really is about two key things. It's about developing skills and being very specific what those golfing skills are. And then when you've developed more golfing skills, it's then being able to access those skills when you need it most, which is out on the golf course and in tournaments. And I think the problem, my experience has been that golfers look too much at swings as opposed to skills. And that doesn't mean to say I'm not saying for 1 minute that you don't work on your golf swing. We'll perhaps go into detail on that. But ultimately, your score will be a reflection of your golfing skills. Do you have the skill to apply the club in a certain way to produce certain shots? Do you have the skill to hit the ball at a certain pace on the greens? But then, as I said, more importantly, can you access those skills once you get on the golf course in something that you deem important?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It actually ties in perfectly to one of our guests earlier, who was Ryan Sullivan. So Ryan Sullivan played the 2013 and 2019 US Opens. And he said at his first US Open, he was so concerned with the look of his backswing and what the Konica Minolta BizHub guy was going to say about his backswing. It's a little short, a little quirky, that he played so terrible. And now, ever since, he sort of realized and has an autonomy of like, you know, I have to do my thing and I have to access those skills. So I think it's really interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I'd actually probably like to go into a little bit of skill development, or maybe, what you think are the most important skills as a golfer. Speed is one that's been brought up before. Excellent lag putting is another one. Kind of curious your take on maybe some of the most important skills.
Well, if you let's start with the real key basics in terms of the game itself, and I think this applies to People who listen to your show, whether they're 20 handicap, 15 handicap, or they're an aspiring PGA Tour player, what is the essential elements that produce golf shots? Well, the only time that the only time that the club supplies information to the golf ball as to what to do is impact. So if we are looking everywhere other than impact, if we get involved in the aesthetics of the swing, as you just mentioned there, getting involved in what does the backswing look like and am I moving in a certain way? And I'm not saying those things are not a factor, but ultimately, and this was really clarified me. We've had lots of conversations over the past few years with Adam Young and John Sherman, who I would think would be great guests on the show. And they talk about, and I fully appreciate, and it's confirmed to me, they talk about the big three of impact. The big three of impact would be strike location. Where do you actually hit the ball on the club face? Are you very good at hitting the center of the face on a consistent basis? What's your ground contact like? How does the club interact with the ground? Have you got the low point in just the right place? And then probably most importantly, what's the face orientation? What's the patterns that you have in terms of presenting the face? Are you presenting it predominantly to the right, to the left? Every golf shot that you hit that you don't like will at some point, at some level, be influenced by one of those three things. And if we're not looking at those three things, I think we're not at what I call the scene of the crime. The scene of the crime is the impact duration. So then you say, well, how do I develop those skills? Well, if you home in on which of those skills that you feel like you need to improve, and I would say for the vast majority of the folks who are listening to this program, if you are embarking on a winter training program, um, if you did nothing other than learn to hit the ball out the middle of the club more often, you would transform your game. Now, I know many people think, wow, that's too easy, that's too straightforward. Surely there's more to it than that. But how often do we ever go and work on a training session, a practice session, with the intention of improving our strike location? Very, very, very few golfers ever
Don't.
work on that.
Yeah.
They'll be thinking about virtually everything in the swing other than that crucial element of where you're striking it on the club face. So how do we develop that skill? First of all, you need to find out what your current patterns are. There's so much technology that can help you with this now. The heat map on TrackMan and things like that that shows you your strike location. Obviously, you can put tape on there and the Dr. Scholl's foot spray, things like that. But find out what your current patterns are. And then I think one of the most important things in skill development is to really embrace the way we learn as human beings. Now, a lot of people trying to learn to play golf or get better at golf or go to the next level, they have a very, very poor relationship with error, in the sense that most people are going to the range constantly trying to do it right. They're trying to hit the correct shots. They're trying to
Yeah.
repeat the same shots over and over again. That is not the way our brain learns most efficiently. If you think about how we do something that still blows the mind of scientists and biomechanics guys and all the rest of it, how the hell do humans learn how to walk? It's an amazing feat of biomechanical engineering that we managed to ever go from crawling to walking. How does a baby learn to do that? Well, thank God that we've not got sort of video analysis of walking and we have walking coaches. What the baby does is it gets up, falls to the left, falls to the right, falls forward, falls backwards, and eventually the brain organizes around error. So it senses falling to the left, falling to the right, and then it's able to organize over a period of time what is essentially balance. So then if you look at this and you think, okay, if my brain learns through error, or it learns efficiently through error, if I want to start trying to hit the ball out the club face more often, well, just for instance, if I can stand on the range, set up with the ball in the middle of the club, and I have the intention of striking the ball progressively more towards the toe, if I can do that, and then if I can move it and progressively hit the ball more towards the heel, and obviously this is dependent on skill level and ability, but if you can deliberately move your strike location towards the toe and towards the heel, surely then you can start to hit it more often out the middle because your brain is calibrating as a result of error. And you can take this principle into virtually every single element of your game, that you utilize error to get where you want to go. So for instance, on the putting green, if you were hitting some putts and I put a tee to the right of the hole and I put a tee to the left of the hole, if I got you to hit some putts and you could hit the tee to the left of the hole and you could hit the tee to the right of the hole, you could find the middle of the cut, because your brain is calibrating face angle. I'm not even telling you to do that, but that's it,
Mhm.
exactly what's happening. So probably a very long-winded answer to the question, but this concept of be clear on the skills that you want to develop, but then utilize and form a different relationship with error. If folks get nothing else from this conversation that we have, if you can change your relationship to error and see that error is not only important, it's essential in the learning process, then you can really develop some more skills.
Yeah, I think that's really brilliant, and I actually stole the idea from your podcast. Is yeah, I'll have a friend who's on the range and he'll be shanking it, right? Just
Mm,
hosel, 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 and I tell him hit it on the toe,
mm.
and I think it was Adam Young who's probably on your podcast that was talking about it, but I'm like just hit it on the toe, just hit it on the toe. They're like it can't be, it's got to be my arm, it's got to be. I'm like just hit the thing on the toe, and they're like okay, and then they hit it off the toe, and I'm like all right, well then hit it in the middle now, and they're like oh. Okay. Like
See,
I've seen it happen probably 10
it's
times
it,
with my friends. Like
it's
it's actually remarkable.
what it is, AJ, it's a result of intention. Now, again, that's a key word, is that our body moves as a result, because of intention. I've got a pen on my desk here. If I look at the pen and I intend to pick it up, I make a series of movements that now the pen's in my hand, and I could now write on a piece of paper with that pen. So having the intention to do something is a powerful driver. Our body organizes around a clear intention. Now, here's the interesting thing, what you just said there. You've got a guy, if you've got a guy on the range and he's shanking it, we could get involved in all the sort of detail of what he may or may not be doing in his swing. And that may or may not change the strike location, but it's not guaranteed. What is pretty much guaranteed is if you highlight the fact that it's out of the hosel and then you move it towards the toe, that will happen. He will start to gain some more control over his strike location. And as a result of that, his movements will probably improve. So you can work endlessly on the movements and the whole picture of the golf swing and not necessarily improve your strike location, not necessarily improve your impact conditions. But if you work at it and reverse engineer it the other way, you can not only do you get faster results, and then you can start maybe looking at how you can change movements to support that. But never ever underestimate the power of a clear intention. Give your body a clear intention, and it's amazing. Even relatively inexperienced golfers, as I just mentioned, the drill with the tee on the greens, tee to the right, tee to the left, center of the hole. Even a ranked beginner can actually do that exercise pretty well, pretty quickly, because it's a clear intention. I'm not giving them a lot of instruction, but they're learning face awareness and face control as a result
Hmm.
of the task and intention.
So, I mean, tying directly into that, I'd probably like to just get into it now. I mean, with the best players in the world that you've worked with, do you think it's, you know, that they are the best at not particularly skill acquisition, but actually having those skills? Or what do you really feel like kind of separates them from even somebody on Challenge Tour, for example? Do you see big discrepancies in skills, or do you see more discrepancies in accessing of those skills?
What I see with the best players, I think, to me, the best players focus a little bit more on the shots as opposed to the swing, in the sense that we tend to, if we play poor golf, we tend to straight away ask what's wrong with my swing. Now, we then can disappear down that rabbit hole of lots of information and lots of opinion. But if I get a player to ask, well, what's wrong with my shots? Then we're getting right to the heat. We're getting right to the scene of the crime, of where things are going on. What is actually going on with your shots? Is there too much shape right to left? Is it too high? Is it too low? What is actually coming out with the golf ball? And I'm a big fan of for good players is working more on developing a toolkit of shots. So for instance, off the tee, I know Scott Fawcett is a big fan, John Sherman, that these guys are a big fan of one shape of shot off the tee. Not everybody agrees with that, but I think it's probably for most people it's a good way to go. But I'd drill down, even deeper on that. So if you're going to play with a kind of predominantly left to right shot, could you sort of refine that a little bit, where there's one where you just maybe squeeze it a little bit lower, or it just floats a little bit higher, and give the shots names. Create your slider, create your bomb, or whatever it is. I think if you can attach a name to the shots that you develop, there's a stronger image in the brain and of what you're trying to do. So
Mhm.
what it ultimately comes down to, AJ, when you play in tournaments, or anybody plays in tournaments, if you think about it, the fundamental question that's asked after a round of golf is how many shots did you play? They don't ask you how many swings did you make. So surely we should be focusing more on developing shots, not just swings.
So really interesting you bring this up, especially with Scott. So whenever he was on my show, he was about ready to go to Q school, and he was talking about having a slightly different driver swing that's teed down, which is something that's brand new for him, like super,
Mm,
super brand new. And I was like,
mm,
I gotta be honest with you, Scott. Like I do generally shape it one way, but I have two different T peg heights, and I have like my little bullet one, and then I have
yeah.
my stock one, and that's what I call it, like you said with the names. So I think it's really interesting that you put it that way where, you know, I'm a big fan of shaping it one way, but I do think there's a world where you have to have those different shots. So I'm definitely in total agreement with you there. Um, in terms of
Just on that point, AJ, sorry
yeah,
I
no, go
get a
ahead,
bit
go ahead.
carried away. Get a bit carried away once again. I think for really good players like you,
Yeah,
to look to the end of a season and sort of say, well, what shots have worked really well this year? What shots do I have command over? And what shots do I probably need to develop a little bit more? You can probably look back through your rounds this year, and there'll be occasions where you needed to just execute a particular shot a little bit better. But I
yeah,
think when you start focusing on shots as opposed to just swings, you're really being specific about developing a skill. Just that's, as you said, that slider or your stock
yeah.
shot, that to me is specific skills as opposed to just working generically. I would say, I've been involved in this for 30 odd years, and I made all these mistakes way back in my playing days. I never ever had a lesson where a coach said to me, right, what shots do you want to develop? Never ever happened. It was always right, okay, what's going wrong in your game? And I'll say, well, this is happening, that's happening. Right, let's look at your swing. And then there was an analysis of what I was doing wrong in the swing. So it was always trying to fix something as opposed to develop something. And there's a world of difference in terms of how your brain responds to that.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that because, over the last few years, my mechanics have gotten better and my putting has gotten better, and I've still stayed at the same handicap. Like my scoring average has dropped a little bit, but I'm still, stuck around like a +3, +4, which obviously is great, but for the level that I want to play at, it's nowhere near good enough. And, you look at me on film and it's like, oh, it's dramatically better. But you give
Mm.
me a back left pin with water left and I miss it left, and like that's still a shot that I struggle with. and
Yeah.
and so that's such an interesting way to one assess a season, but also to plan going into a season. So I think that's actually quite interesting.
So then you can drill even deeper where you start to cross the bridge from developing the skill to accessing the skill, whereby um, you've just highlighted a specific shot that's giving you a problem, a back left pin, and you're trying to play a certain shot into that. Okay, well, for me, a big part of your training session should be working on the shot that you want to play in that situation, but then setting up very, very strict and specific training around that. Where, for instance, you could be on the range and you could say to yourself, right, we're gonna create 10 shots with 10 different irons into that kind of flag. But then you would set it up like this, where you'd be on the range, and what you've got to do is that you've got to hit the shot to that imaginary flag in that scenario, and then you've got to walk away, and you've actually got to walk away and have an interval before you then come back and hit another one. So you walk away from the shot and give yourself time to think and contemplate and all the things that happen on the golf course, and then you come back and you have to play a different club to a different target, but the same kind of scenario. So then you're really highlighting this is the specific situation I want to get better at. Okay, I need to develop the skill of the shot, but I need to test it then under kind of extreme training conditions to see if I'm able to execute that shot. Because again, just standing there hitting the same shot over and over again, that's part of the skill development, but it's not the bridge to access the skill out on the golf course.
I think that's really brilliant because I actually just watched a interview with Matt Fitzpatrick, and he said one of the biggest things that has changed in his practice and why he's doing better now, and you've seen him, obviously he's been a great player, but like he's made the jump, is he will go and he'll hit an iron shot and then he'll walk across to the putting green and then go hit a putt and then come and hit a driver into a fairway and then go and hit a chip and have to get it up and down and then he
Yeah.
like that's how he practices now and like he writes all the shots down. Obviously, he's super analytical guy, but I think that's really an interesting way to go about practice and not one way that I've done for sure.
Because I fell into this trap certainly in my playing days that we equate hard work. People say I'm working so hard on my game, and I kind of think, well, what the hell does that mean? I'm working hard on my game. Do you think that standing there hitting 500 shots is hard work? Well, in some ways, if you think about it, there's a madness to that we equate hitting 500 shots as just being a universally good thing. Now, I know there's time for repetition and things like that and developing skills, but ultimately, we're trying to hit less shots when we go out on the golf course. We're trying to do less of something in golf, where most sports, you're trying to do more of something. You're trying to score more runs or score, more points or whatever. So exactly to that point, then if I can hit 10 shots in a practice session where it's really strict like that, where I move away and then I come back, that's hard work. It's
Mm-hmm.
not it's not a lot of effort, it's not a lot of time, but it's hard work to do that. But my goodness, that is training you to then replicate that skill in that environment. And I think, if there was a massive generalization, AJ, I would say my experience with players as they get better, to the detriment, they spend less time on the golf course. And I think we need to certainly, good players like you, I think asking yourself really tough questions about, am I actually spending enough time training on the golf course itself? Because ultimately, as far as I'm aware, you'll only ever play tournaments on a golf course. You're not going to play too many tournaments, I wouldn't imagine, on a range.
Yeah.
And then you can start to look at the golf course as this fantastic opportunity to go out and specifically train in certain ways. I've got a whole bunch of games that I work on with tour players where they go onto the golf course and there's a real purpose to 9 holes of training. And I think when you come off the golf course and you've had a good session on the golf course and the numbers back it up, that is worth millions of shots on the range, because that's you executing your skills on the golf course, not just executing it on the range.
Could you dive in a little bit on maybe some of the different games that you'll play with them?
Yeah, I mean, the one favorite I've had, I mean, probably a lot of people have heard of this, but I'll give you a couple of examples where um, you look at the reality of the game. Now, the reality of the game is, even at the highest level, the best players in the world only hit what, 12, 13 greens in regulation. If you're
Yeah,
hitting 13 greens in regulation consistently on good golf courses, you're at the highest level of the game. So within that statistic, we know that every round that you play, there's probably going to be a number of greens that you miss. You're not going to hit every green in regulation.
sure.
So surely we should be training for that. So one of the favorite games I have, and a number of players that I can think I've worked with over the years, Laurie Cantor certainly used this an awful lot in the time we were together, whereby you'd go on the golf course and you play 6 or 9 holes where you have to deliberately miss the green in the best possible place with your approach shot. And by that, and you get strict with it, the better the play. You're not allowed to miss the green short. You can't just leave everything short of the green. You've got to miss the green left or right in a specific place. So you're trying to aim for a bunker or you're trying to aim for a flat spot or whatever. And the thing is with that, you get so much from this game because and Laurie used to do this regularly in practice rounds on the tour, on the DP World Tour. As you play this game, you get to see much more of the actual golf course. You get to be more aware of the holes that you're playing. But if you can hit a bunker deliberately, you can certainly hit a green deliberately. So you're actually the game is tougher than the real game. But the whole purpose of it is you play 6 or 9 holes, you've missed every green. Now, if you can get it round in, say, 1 or 2 over, or occasionally we'll get a player who shoots level for 9 holes, having missed every green. That's a massive boost to confidence. And you think, well, no matter if I go through that spell in a tournament where I miss a bunch of greens, I've trained for that. I'm ready for that occurrence. So that's one. And another good one is that many, and this again applies at your level, at the higher
Yeah.
levels of the game, our brain gets very used to. It's kind of like a homeostasis. It's kind of like a thermostat, really, in our brain. That our brain is always wanting to come back to comfort, I believe, something that we're familiar with. You know, if you think of all the things that we do in our life where we establish patterns, and if we go into a Starbucks, we'll tend to order the same drink. We'll tend to sit in the same place. If we have a favorite restaurant, we'll tend to move towards a familiar table. And what
Hmm.
happens on the golf course is we get comfortable at certain scores. So for some people, a comfortable score, if you're a 10 handicapper, would be, dropping a number of shots around that. For a better player, it would be 1 or 2 under par. Now, if you've never experienced 5, 6, 7, 8 under par, your brain's going to freak out when you get into that situation. So let's train for that. Let's train for that. And a great game for it is where you go out and you play what I call potential better ball. So you take it out, you go on the golf course, you've got a card in your hand, and the deal is you're trying to make as many birdies as you possibly can. And the deal is you hit your shot, and you are allowed to play a second shot if you need it. So if you hit the fairway, sorry, if you miss the fairway, you can hit another shot. If you hit your approach shot to 40 feet, you can hit another shot. If you miss the birdie putt, you get a second chance. The whole thing is to see how low you can score for 9 holes. Now, I've had a bunch of guys play this game, and they've gone out on the golf course, and they've shot like 9 or 10 under for 9 holes.
Hmm.
And there's something psychologically really, really important about actually writing those numbers on a scorecard. Now, what's really interesting, AJ, I've had a number of guys play this game, and they've been amazed how few second shots they've actually hit. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
you're giving yourself the freedom that there's a second serve there if you need it. But
Yeah.
there's something about the freedom of doing that that allows you to shoot some ridiculous numbers, but you've actually seen it on a scorecard. You've seen 6 under, 7 under for 9 holes. You've experienced what low numbers look like. And some people say, well, isn't that fooling yourself? Well, it's fooling yourself the right way,
Yeah.
because you're fooling yourself if you think 2 under is as good as you can be when you can probably shoot 5, 6, 7, 8 under.
Yep. So I think that's really interesting. Both of those things tie back into the conversation I actually had with Tim O'Neill yesterday, who just recently won on the Champions Tour. His favorite game is similar to the one that you do with Laurie, which is worst ball version
Mm.
of. So he'll play 2 balls and hit his worst one, and then the game that I've done that I did this year, similar to what you're talking about. I'm gonna try your version, but I would go up to the red tees
Yeah,
and try to break 60, and I shot 59 this year, and
perfect.
made 2 bogeys. And
Yeah,
it's the mindset flip. Like even now in tournaments, if I get, whatever, 3, 4, 5, 6 under, it's like I'm still just like go, go, go. Whereas before I
Exactly.
used to be like, oh, like let's get this to the house, like let's be careful here, and then you end up shooting one over, and you're like, oh. So it's
Exactly.
it's
So
really
see,
interesting.
see the golf course not just as a proving ground, but as a training ground. See the
Mhm.
golf course as this magnificent opportunity to go out there, and you're only limited by your imagination. There's a million different games that you can play, but I think for most, especially better players, I've seen careers that have been ruined primarily, I think, because players grew up playing lots of golf. They got to a certain level. They then started to go down the rabbit hole of technique and started to play less and less and less. And guess what? The brain then starts to perceive a golf course as a threatening environment as opposed to a place of opportunity. Now, when your brain is perceiving the environment as a threat, I'm not talking about consciously, this is a subconscious thing.
Sure. Yeah.
If there's a perception that the golf course is a threat, then there's going to be a physiological response to that, and your ability to coordinate movement, your ability to judge pace, all of those things are compromised by the perception of threat. So
Yeah.
the more we can see the golf course as this, this is my opportunity to explore. This is my sort of sandpit that I get to play in and explore different things. It's a really important point that for everybody listening, that you've got to get to a point where your brain perceives at a deep level that the golf course is a place of opportunity, not threat. And I think most people would know at some point, if you think about our golfing evolution, no kids who start to play golf see the golf course as a threat. They're just out there, just having a bunch of fun. They're just whacking a ball around. At some level, they then get better at the game. They get some adulation as a result of that. They then start to enter bigger tournaments and bigger events. And some people then fall into the trap of seeing that the golf is a definition of their value as a person. And then when that happens, the golf course can become a very threatening environment. I think Scheffler, and it's easy to pick on the best player in the world and sort of, create causation. But I think Scheffler's a perfect example. If you listen to some of the things that he says about the game, golf is not a threat to him. I know people listening say, well, it's okay saying that if you've won $50 million or whatever he's won this year, but there's a reason
Yeah.
he's won so much money. Golf is something that Scheffler does. It's not something that he is. He realizes there's a separation between Scotty Scheffler, the person, and Scotty Scheffler, the golfer. I fell into the trap of defining my value as a person relative to what the golf ball did. And I ended up with a very, very dysfunctional relationship with the game where I left the game for a few years because I hated it so much because it had destroyed me as a person. So I think, I'm sure a lot of people listening will relate to that. And these are sort of some deep and difficult questions at times, but you've got to sort of ask some of these questions of what does golf actually mean to me, and what have I fallen into the trap of allocating my worth to?
Yeah, no, I think we were talking a little bit before the podcast, but I think that's been probably one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've had this year. And I'm comfortable enough talking about it. Like I've done some work after hearing about your program that you have, I believe, with Raymond Pryor, talking about building stable confidence. And ultimately, like you said, the goal of it is to establish who your identity is away from the golf course. So I actually sat down with my personal counselor and said, okay, like who am I outside of golf? Like if I can't play golf again tomorrow, like what are the character traits that I have? What are the attributes? What are the things that I do? And ultimately the mission of that was to try and figure out who I am away from the golf course. And that's actually brought me in a lot more of enjoyment on the golf course because it's just I'm not, you know, I would be playing rounds before and I'd be thinking, oh, what's everyone going to think of if I shoot this score? Or what are people going to think of me? Are people not going to like me anymore? Are all my friends not going to want to hang out with me? Like these are active thoughts that I could be having.
Of course.
And people don't like to talk about it, but I'll talk about it. And those are for me, those were a massive detriment to me being able to what we talked about earlier is either access the skill or perform to the level. So I think, I can certainly encourage everybody out there, either, purchase Carl's program, or, just go and have a think yourself, or work with a counselor to think about what the game means to you, and then also think about who you are if you could never play it again. This really goes for competitive golfers. It's maybe not so much for those that are, well, actually, no, I feel some friends,
I think
I think
I
all
think it's
golfers actually, now that I
I
think
think it's
about it.
I think it's across the board because
Yeah,
you know, I think we all, not all, but most people at some point probably fall into this trap. It always fascinates me when I walk up and down a range. You know, I can be somewhere in the world and I'll walk up and down a range, and you know, people have got no idea who the hell I am, and I'm walking past, and I can see the behavior of some golfers there. When they know somebody's walking towards them, they pretend they're going to start working on the backswing or something to avoid hitting a shot that they
yeah.
think I'm going to be watching. And I just think, like, wow, that's amazing how we've skewed this thing so much that people invest so much of their ego in what a golf ball does. And then when you look at it and you think, well, if I play the game of golf defines me as a person, there is just too much variability in outcomes to ever allocate so much importance to that. You know, and as we talk about, and you mentioned Raymond there, we talk about in the program, the only place really that you can ever develop stable confidence. It's not through better technique, it's not through equipment, it's not through a better swing. All of those things you should work on, but none of those, AJ, are ever going to protect you from bad shots. Nobody in the history of the game has worked it out. You know, Mo Norman got close, Ben Hogan got close, but even they didn't eliminate poor shots. The only place that we can ever completely develop a stability of confidence is a willingness to accept the variety of outcome. And the variety of outcome for every single player who plays this game, you know, the only thing we know when we go and play golf, the one thing that we know for certain above anything else is we don't know what's going to happen. Now, you can either be terrified of that and try and control it, or you can embrace it. You can embrace the fact that I've no idea what the hell's going to happen here, but I'm going to pit my skills against this golf course and see what happens. You know, that single phrase, let's see what happens, is a very, very liberating way to play the game. Because if you say, well, let's see what happens, you're saying to your brain, do you know what? Whatever happens today, I'll deal with it. And it's at that point then that the threat level reduces in the brain. And when the threat level reduces in the brain, then you get to access your skill.
So you touched on a really important thing there that you speak about a lot in your podcast, and that's the skill of acceptance. I know it's very important to you, and I definitely agree. I don't know if you wanted to dive into that a little bit more in terms of the value of acceptance, and then even, maybe how to go about developing. You mentioned a little bit there, but go about developing that more.
Yeah. I, I think if I was to gift somebody the ultimate, or if somebody said to me, what's the ultimate skill, mental game skill, it would be the skill of acceptance. Now, what sounds a simple statement, because everybody will buy into the idea that, yeah, I've got to accept whatever happens. There's probably 100 layers underneath that initial intellectual understanding of developing the skill of acceptance. Acceptance isn't resignation. We're not saying go out and pretend if you knock it out of bounds that you're going to smile and say, oh, I'm glad to be alive and it's a lovely day. We're not saying any of that. What acceptance genuinely is a willingness to embrace the reality of the game. And the reality of the game is on any given shot, it could go left, it could go right, it could go up, it could go down. There is a variety of outcomes. Unless you are willing to accept that, you will then always be on that tightrope of trying to control the game to such a degree that it restricts your capabilities. So developing the skill of acceptance is something that you could start at the beginning of the season and embark on having that as one of your core skills that you're going to develop. So, for instance, before a round, I'm a massive fan. You've probably heard me say, on the Mind Caddy app that we have, that, a journal. I think a journal is probably the most essential thing that you can have if you want to work on your mental game, so that you can self-reflect, so that if you want to develop the skill of acceptance before a round, commit to that. Write it down that you're going to go out there and you're going to have a willingness. You're going to give everything that you can and engage in the golf course, and you know do as well as you possibly can. But you're going to have a willingness to accept there's going to be a variety of outcomes. Because I look at it and think, well, what's the alternative? Get pissed off for what? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 3 holes, 10 holes? Because how many times, and everybody listening to this will relate to this, how many times have you played golf this last year where it's not the bad shot that's the problem, it's the reaction to the bad shot that's the problem? And how one missed putt leads to then a poor tee shot, and then a double bogey on the par five where most times you'd make four, and so on. So it's that embracing and understanding that acceptance is first of all, it becomes it's a concept, but then you take that concept on, and to make it an embodied experience requires some work and some dedication and some reflection in your journal.
No, I think that's great. I think the idea of journaling is one that I certainly need to commit to. And quite frankly, one I just forget about. So I think that's awesome. Kind of parlaying back here, we've discussed a lot of awesome things. Um, do you think, in your opinion, that with, say, the right amount of time and money resources, that not anyone, but kind of anyone could, in theory, become, if they wanted to be, a Laurie Cantor or a Lee Westwood or Louis Oosthuizen, or do they have certain things that just some people don't have in terms of golf skill, natural talents? How much do you think natural talent weighs into this whole thing, and do you believe in natural talent?
I think there's an element of genetics, and I've worked with Ryan Fox for a long time. His father is a legend of rugby union. He was an All Black. His
All Blacks.
grandfather
Yeah,
his grandfather was one of the best cricketers who played for New Zealand. There's obviously some pretty good genetics in his makeup.
sure.
So I'm not an expert on this, but clearly it has its part to play. I'm going to reverse into the question a little bit, AJ, and say I think the quest should be is not so much about, can I become a Lee Westwood or a Ryan Fox or a Louis Oosthuizen or whatever. Can I embark on a path of mastery whereby I'm looking at what I do as an individual, and if it really engages me and it interests me, can I just see how good I can be? Can I explore developing the skills that we've talked about and just see what I could be capable of? Now, within that, yes, there'll always be people who I'll beat, and there's always be people who will beat me. And I win a tournament. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about a
Yeah,
hypothetical individual.
yeah,
There'll be some tournaments that I win, but Tiger didn't win every tournament. He got close for a while. Jack didn't win every tournament. Most of the time, we're not going to win at golf. But I think if there's an inherent desire to just see what you're capable of and embark on this path of mastery, aiming to master a game you'll never master, I think that's a pretty good way of spending your time while you're on this revolving thing spinning through space. I think it's a good endeavor, as long as you then don't cross the boundary and it become everything where it defines your value as a person.
no, I think that's probably a really beautiful point to end on here, in terms of, kind of putting the bow on everything. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add? I know we touched on the MindCaddy app a little bit. I'd like to give you a plug for the MindCaddy app, or some of your different programs that you have coming out. But I don't know if you want to talk any more on any of those items before we go.
Yeah, I think for folks listening, if you're interested in the mental side of the game, as an exploration, that the Mind Caddies, I think I'm pretty proud of it. Really, we've worked on it for a while now. It's an app that you can download. You can test it out for free. There's various games on there. There's lots of skills that you can develop with that, and it's an easy entry point into looking at some of these things. But what it does, it provides an accountability to what you're doing. For those who join up. You can get the Mind Caddy journal, things like that. So I think, yeah, if you go to the App Store and have a look for the Mind Caddy, that's a decent entry point. And then there's the podcast that we have every week, which is called the Mind Caddy as well. So I think those would be two decent ways to get going.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Carl. We appreciate your time today and appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Enjoyed the conversation.
Cheers.